like when we got our first consoles, a lot of people saw this like as an addiction.
They'd be like, you're spending too much time playing video games, and that's why your scores are dropping.
It was pretty new to them, and I was like, hey, I want to do this as a career, like sometime in my future.
You kind of need to take decisions seriously because you are almost 21, and
Yeah.
the choices that you make from now onwards is going to shape your trajectory.
Hey everybody, welcome to our very first episode. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about a topic which is pretty close to both of our hearts and pretty relevant, I'd say, to both of us, which is how we convinced our parents to get into gaming. Specifically, gaming as a course, as well as following that the gaming industry. So there's a lot that we're going to be covering in this episode. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
That's a super relevant topic when you think about it, especially if you're like coming from brown households, like people kind of look at games as just entertainment, and they kind of compare it to movies of sorts. So they kind of
Yeah.
think it's a super project based thing and a very profit based thing. Like, it's true, but then again, it also works like a tech company where you're getting paid month on month. So that is a part which they don't really think about, and they are super scared, especially coming from conventional families. Like my family, like most of them are like professors or teachers or bankers. So they are all from very stable institutions which have very minimum layoffs and all that. But compared to the games industry, like when you think
Especially now,
about
right?
games, yeah, especially now when you think about, I don't know, my dad's actually super chill about this, telling me that you will figure stuff out. He seems a lot more confident than I am,
Yeah, for
given the
some reason,
current
my
situation.
parents now are more chill. Like, I'm surprised that they're
Yeah,
they're they're like, okay, you can hang in there. But yeah,
but
that's pretty nice that they're more supportive. Yeah.
initially when I told them I wanted to make games, they were just completely, I wouldn't say against the idea, but then again, they were like, you need to have a nice backup if you want to do this. So they were like, maybe explore options in MBA before you go do your game design or whatever. It was kind of on those lines, but I knew for a fact that doing MBA before doing anything else felt more like a trap. In the sense that now that you have done MBA, you can also become a banker. No, no way. I'm kind of like becoming a banker, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a great life, but definitely not a life for me.
Actually, speaking of this, it's going back to a little bit of the history of how all of this started. Uh, like in my household, initially when like games were a thing, like when we got our first consoles, a lot of people saw this like as an addiction. They were like, okay, this is not something that you should be doing full time. So I was like kind of discouraged, I would say, on just how much time I could spend at this. For me, I've kind of really enjoyed this because it felt more entertaining for me than movies, and definitely more entertaining than like watching TV at that point of time. So I used to like try and spend as much as time as I could, but then like just listening to those relatives kind of didn't kind of made me felt bad that I was spending too much time on this. But how was it in your house? Like how was it like starting to play with like games and stuff?
For us, we never really had consoles at home, so it was mostly a PC. Usually not like top of the line spec. No, I kind of got a really good spec gaming laptop only after I was in my undergrad. Till then, it was mostly PCs with integrated GPUs and stuff.
Yeah.
So there were only so many games which you could play. But that kind of led me into like sit down, work with a lot of stuff. Like, because I only had a PC, if I wanted to play Game Boy titles, or if I wanted to play PlayStation 1 titles, I had to sit down to emulate them. And that's how I kind of got into like learning how to emulate stuff, and then sitting down to edit these text files. And it's kind of got me interested in, like, oh, okay, these are things which I could be doing. And I kind of got interested more on how the back end of games work. I kind of looked up modding back then. I wasn't like too chill about it, couldn't get it. But when it came to my parents, they kind of did not care too much about how much time I spent. It was more about as long as I was getting decent grades, they did not mind. But when my grades did drop, this conversation would happen where they'd be like, "You're spending too much time playing video games, and that's why your scores are dropping, or you're just spending too much time reading books, and that's why your scores are dropping," right? otherwise they never really cared. Like I used to head out to a friend's place, play Halo together, or like we used to play Halo a lot, like Halo 3 on the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
It used to be our jam all the time. And they never really cared. They were like, okay, go play Halo, go play soccer outside, doesn't matter. It's just like as long as my grades were fine, they were fine with it. They were just like, okay,
Yeah.
another distraction to keep these two boys from fighting with each other. Like, yeah, my brother
Fair
and I,
enough.
we fought a lot. Especially, we only had a 2 year gap, so we
Yeah.
kind of were in the same age group. And yeah, the house was a chaos. Like it was absolute chaos whenever we were. So it was like whatever kept us from fighting, they were happy about it.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this, like you were mentioning earlier, is that this was pretty new, right? Like you're saying, your family is like people who are bankers, and
Yeah.
my mom was also in the banking industry. My dad was in like IT, so it was pretty new to them. And I was like, hey, I want to do this as a career, like sometime in my future. Firstly, they did not know what that meant because. Even going back to then, like when I was that young, I did not know what that meant because my exposure to like making games was like, okay, it just was like some industry that does that, or it was just a part of the tech industry that just makes these and it comes out. I did not know that this could be a career I could jump into. It could be something that I could would do in my future. And that was also because I feel like there was a lot less like people who were from like India who were working on games, or the exposure for us to know that was much more lesser back then, right? But much lesser, I would say. So when I started this conversation off, it was more of like confusion or like not understanding what exactly it meant compared to them like being no, this is not something that you can do. uh, and was that like similar in your experience, or how did that work? Like,
I think for me, I just assumed to be making games, you need to be a software developer. I just assumed that by default. And my parents, I when I told them I kind of wanted to make games, this was probably when we had to choose if we had to major in, biology
yeah,
or
yeah, computer
computer
science,
science.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's
Like
when my
after your
conversation
10th
came
grade,
up too. Yeah.
yeah, after 10th grade, you need to make those decisions, right? So, bunch of my cousins, they are in IT. So, I was talking to them, asking them, what should I be doing? Because we had like two computer science courses. One was C++, and the other
Yeah.
was a Java. So, I was
Java.
talking
Hmm.
to them, and they were like, so if you're thinking about something like games and stuff, it's mostly probably C++. That's what people use.
Yeah,
They did not know much about games. They were like C, C++. That's what probably they use because it's more optimized or whatever. They were saying something. I don't
exactly.
really
Yeah,
remember that. But I was like, yeah, they said games C, C++. What I want, I
that's
got.
all it
So
is.
I'll go do C, C++. Right. My dad wasn't, my parents were more like, okay, just go do computer science. Just do it. We'll figure stuff out from there. Right. You are just in like 10th grade. So your views might change. So
Yeah, that's true.
they did not discourage me, but neither did they like actively encourage me too much to the point where I might become delusional about it. So, but yeah, eventually what they said kind of came true. Where once I got to like pointers in C++ plus plus and stuff, and I was like,
Is
then
this
I
what I want
switched
to
over to
do,
do
really?
physics. Yeah, I was like, I switched over to physics. I did my undergrad in physics. And
Yeah.
then it was around this point when I was applying for a master's in physics that I realized I really didn't want to continue studying physics. Physics was fun, but I think I did physics more as a hobby than as like my main form of study now that I come to think about it. I mean, I told you, right? I got my gaming laptop during my undergrad. I
Undergrad,
think it
yeah.
was, yeah, second semester or something. And then I started playing Assassin's Creed Origins and the games during that point. I was like, maybe I should just get back to it. I started researching again. That's when I discovered game design as a field
Yeah.
when I was looking at like how to get into the how to break into the games industry, what do you need to do to be a part of games, and that's when I was like, there were game programmer roles, and then there were game designer roles. It was like, what is a game designer? Because I know what a graphic designer is, I know what a
Yeah,
designer
exactly.
in
Yeah, yeah.
general is, but what exactly is a game designer? That's how I kind of stumbled upon this. And then I pitched that again to my parents, saying that, hey, you know what? A master's in physics doesn't seem that cool, but games and
That's the
And
jam
then
right
it
now.
became, yeah, yeah, yeah. I kind of want to get back to it. And that's
Yeah,
when they were like, you kind of need to take decisions seriously because you are almost 21. And
yeah,
the choices that you make from now onwards is going to shape your trajectory uh, for at least a while in your life. So you need to be very cognizant about what you're going to be doing.
that's right.
And yeah, it was around this time I joined a internship thing, and they were trying to gamify educational experiences. They were building Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, and I was the only intern application which had game design and game design related stuff. All other people are like marketing, graphic
Yeah,
design, syllabus, and all that. And I was this guy who was like game design, this, that, and they were like, yes, we have zero game. So there was only one game designer on the company, and apart from that, there wasn't anyone. So those people were like, okay, this guy sounds like someone. Like, let's pick him up. So that's how I kind of got into my initial game design phase, and I started building stuff there. Then I started studying and reading up on my own a lot, and I pitched to my parents again this whole idea, and they started doing their research. And I think that's where things started changing, where they became more encouraging about this field. Till that point, they were like 50-50 about it.
true. I think one point which you mentioned is the whole 11th and 12th
Oh,
about your
yeah.
decision of CS, right? That happened to me in like undergrad because I had to choose between like a traditional programming versus like a software engineering, which was a much more niche course at that time, which my university had offered. And that was a decision I took, which was like, okay, if I want to get into games, because up until then it was for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to go into programming, I'm going to do this, I'm going to become a game programmer in the end. I got into undergrad. I tried out this course called software engineering. I was exposed to this concept of project management, software dev lifecycle. And like, okay, I really enjoyed the aspect of like talking to people, more of the project management side. And then that's when I started researching, and then spoke to people and found out that there's like production as a whole thing. And I realized that programming was not my jam. So I was like, okay, let me try and experiment with this. um, and then like fast forward, yes, I did my masters in that, and it worked out. But at that point of time, like you were saying, like when I had to do my own research, because I told my parents I wanted to get into programming at first. They're like, okay, cool, let's try that out. And then I was like, this some new thing called production. Like, what is that? What does that even mean, right? And that conversation came up, so I was like, I had to sit down, explain the whole thing to them, that this is what I'll be doing. This is what I like really learned from my undergrad. And they were like, okay. So again, like they also had to do their own research. Like, is this viable? Something that, because eventually they were investing for me for this course. So I was like, okay, they had to see if that made sense, if that was something that I'd be happy in. And then one of the good things that happened at the time is I got to go to a couple of college fairs. So one of the universities, I think Full Sail, had come up at that time, so they were like, okay, this is a game design course, this is what we'll be teaching, all of this, and then like this is where our alumni are. I think that kind of gave a really great driving factor for my parents, thinking that okay, maybe like this is something that he can do, because like of the success that they've seen before. And at that time I also slightly started to get them to play video games, and I was like, oh cool, look at all these cool things that people have made, your son can do the same thing in the future sometime. So I think that's how my conversation steered, and eventually they went from like a 50-50, like you're saying, to like, okay, do this,
Yeah,
dude, like if you
that's the
really like
future
it,
here.
just try
Yeah.
it out, right? I think the main thing was that they saw how passionate I was, like in even while like convincing them, right? If it's like, if you show passion towards something, that is when it actually like makes them get convinced as well. So they saw how passionate I was. They saw me like trying to build like random stuff on like Unity to test out to play, and then I started like taking courses on Unreal at that time. They're like, okay, this dude's pretty serious about this. Let's see where this goes, right? So that's how like my path to where I was, where I started, like actually grew to here.
Now that you mention about it, I did more of the convincing just through talking. Like, I never really showed my parents anything which I made or all that. But then again, they saw me sitting down to study. Whenever I opened YouTube on my laptop, right? Like, at times my dad would be like, I want to check this or something. And YouTube would be open on my laptop. And it would always be game design, right? And every single night I was just playing games with my friends. I was playing different games, And he'd be like, "What are you up to?" And I'll tell him, "This is a game which I'm playing, and this is what we are supposed to be doing. This is how it works. If you look at the art style here, this is how it differs. These are the things which they have set up as pointers in the level." Like, he really doesn't understand games. My dad never really played games. My mom has at least played some. We played a few games on the PS2 as well. When I started explaining stuff, breaking things down to them, when they were just like, "Oh, what are you doing?" They kind of started seeing the effort which I was putting in to understand, to study, and how I was doing all the work, right? Where they kind of saw me putting in effort to also convince them. And they have also seen me talk about like I'd just be at times I'd just pick a call with my friend, and we were playing Dota 2 at that point, and we would discuss hero builds, and I would like argue with them saying why a particular hero build was good, and why some things weren't good. And even though this is like, at some level anybody could be doing it, it's
Yeah.
like you need to understand the game at a particular level for you to be able to hold these conversations with your friends. Like, most of the people, if you look at them, they probably follow online guides
Yeah.
to, say, "Oh, this is a hero build which I want." There are people who have played it enough that they kind of understand it intuitively. But I was someone with just like 600 hours in the game. Just 600 hours. Yes, Dota is like that. I know people who have had like 2,000, 3,000
Yeah, yeah. I
hours
have
in
friends
just
who've
one
had that too.
account.
Yeah.
And this is one account I'm talking about. These guys have like two, three accounts where they're playing Dota, like, and each of them would probably be at a minimum of 1,000 hours. Like, those guys used to sell accounts when they got bored of a particular account.
Yeah,
They would
yeah.
have like
I've seen that.
4,000
Yeah.
hours on it, and they would just sell it. And they would sell it on somewhere. And it's like, "Bro, I just made some, 10K by selling." I'm like, what?
Should
Right? But
make
yeah,
that as a
as
career
I
now.
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure people do that as a business. But you can see those are people who have spent enough time that they kind of intuitively look at stuff. But
Yeah.
I was like just 600 hours, right? Or maybe lesser. And to me, I had to like sit, look, read at items, all that, and understand how all of that works, and then put things together and be like, "Oh, this is a build which I'm going." And it would be a non-conventional build. We will lose that
Yeah.
match, but still, I was like, I built that, and it was a great thing. It was like, so I think explaining those things and having those arguments with my friends saying that this is what we should have done, or when playing CS, I'd be like, the map is designed like this, which means
Yeah.
that us attacking this way kind of makes more sense than us having to do this, or smoking here would make more sense than smoking there, right? Uh,
I hope like parents don't find this out of
oh
context.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. I'll be like
We will
smoking
put
an
visuals for
entrance or
better.
something. Yeah.
We'll put better visuals to
Yeah, yeah.
explain the
So,
context.
so they kind of saw all this happening, and then they're like, "Okay, this guy's kind of serious. So let's give it a shot."
When I was like applying for this, and then I had gone to like college fairs, the next step for me was like to apply for my masters. And it was at that point where I had to, there were like no college one, any of these counseling centers. Like all of my friends had gone to some of these or signed up for any of these. And they were like pretty much helping out with like correcting your statement of purposes, like making it more like tailored. And none of these people actually understood like what games were for, like isn't like the what games
Yeah.
courses offered, or even like what SOPs they were looking for. Any of these things, like none of those people really understood what it was for. So that like made it like really hard for me to like even go towards them or invest in them. So I had to like do a lot more work on my own. And all these places also require like a portfolio of work. So like that portfolio also took time. So it was at this stage like my parents actually saw how much effort I was putting into it. And they were like, okay, this is like a really great thing that he's actually doing something so passionate. I don't think they've seen me doing anything more passionately than like when I was like applying for this or researching for this or playing games at that point, right, to see what all I really liked. So they're like, okay, let's like invest in this and see how it goes. And like that's how it kind of started getting better. Like the conversation started steering more towards, okay, what kind of games would you like to make, or what specific side of like game development are you going to be contributing to, what does production mean, and all of those things. I didn't have all the answers at that point of time, but it was definitely something that I could at least initiate a conversation with or give them immediate answers that this is what it is. But I'll learn more when I go there, and hopefully I'll like find a job and like actually excel at what I'm like learning right now. because I had no backup plans, and like they were like, it's okay, we'll see how this goes, and then we'll like figure it out. But like gaming was the only thing that I was steered towards. So yeah, I mean it was a good bet that they
Uh,
did in the end. So
Jeez. I mean, that's totally relatable because when I think about it, I also have sort of no backup plans. Like, I do have one, but then again, yeah. But then again, it's like, I know for a fact, like, games are the one thing which I could be doing, and then there is mm, no other thing which I would ever do, right?
yeah,
Like, I feel, yeah, then I'm just here to make games. Like, I know for a fact, like, it's like you have found your purpose and you're right now trying to figure out how to fulfill your purpose, right? And for me,
yeah.
I'm at that point where I know for a fact there's no other thing in the world which I would be doing. Uh, so, yeah, I don't know, it's like there was this thing that yeah, this is something which I want to do, and then things started clicking in slowly. For me, it was like I was telling one of one of my friends, right? Like a mutual, and he was like, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's Karan. Connect. I'll connect you with Karan." And for me, after I'd done my research with colleges and the colleges which I want to go to and all that, I think it was more about like you were already in the US at that point, if I'm
Yeah,
right.
I
Like
already
you were in
started my
your
masters.
yeah,
Yeah,
you are in your first year of Utah, or maybe like your second semester or
I
something
was in
like
my
that.
yeah second semester, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, this was right before Valorant released. So
yeah, yeah.
I think that gives a good anchor point. uh, so it was like we were talking about like I was getting to understand how to build a portfolio and all that because I didn't have a portfolio. Uh, and that kind of put me behind by a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had planned to apply in 2020. No, I had planned to apply for the 2019 so I can get in the 2020 fall. But
Fall
because
batch.
I
Yeah.
did not have a portfolio, I had to push by another year so that I could build a portfolio. Um, and that kind of also, in a lot of ways, happened organically where I was telling, oh, I need to build a portfolio, I need to make a game. And then I got this thin project where I had to make a game
Mm-hmm.
for a online music festival that was happening, and I was building this card game which was based on music, and that kind of acted like the centerpiece for my whole portfolio.
Portfolio.
And
Yeah.
then yeah, there was a lot of graphic design stuff which I did. Programming was something which I didn't do much, but I still had my GitHub. But I knew for a fact if I linked my GitHub, they probably would say no, sorry, please. So it was like a super empty GitHub. Like I for some reason I opened a GitHub back in 2018, and 2018, 19, 20 I did not have any projects.
Oh
There
my
was
god.
one
Yeah.
project which was basically like hello world, right? And I'm pretty sure,
Everybody's first project on there.
yeah, pretty sure that hello world would have been like the most impressive thing they're going to see in my portfolio, right? Like, no way they're going to give me an admit based on that. So I did not link my GitHub there. But yeah, things kind of worked out. But a lot of stuff, like a lot of things which you had to do, I had to do less of it because you had already done it. And
Yeah,
talking to
done
you,
most of
like,
it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, yeah, these are things which I don't have to care about because he has done it and he has briefed me on it, so I don't have to do my research. But
That's true. Actually,
even
like
with
when I
that, there was so much work. Like, there
I
was
know
so
for
much
sure.
work to do.
It is also because like completely different universities, like the
Yeah,
while the concept of like gaming was like common, like you were going to a very design heavy field when I was going to a production heavy field. So like our portfolios, even though it was like inspired, it's like very different because like
different
you
way.
had to apply for
Yeah,
something from for your niche. But like you mentioned, right? Like when you were trying to apply, I was already here. At that stage, I felt like I wish somebody was there. So I think that's like the
hmm.
whole ground point of which like why we're trying to do this is that now we know that
Oh
somebody's here and
yeah,
what they had gone through, so that like the people who are coming new don't have to like face this from the scratch or like worry like, oh god, how do I even get started with this, right?
yeah. I mean, I've seen quite a few people. Like, I've had quite a few people reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, saying, "Yo, how did you like get into this, what did you do and all that." And I've sat down to explain to people how I got in, what my whole process was. And I was very surprised as to how so many people are actually interested in this. But
Exactly.
then
Yeah, yeah.
again, they are
That's a
not
new thing.
like, they're interested, but then again, they're not, invested enough, or
Yeah.
maybe they are still a little bit scared to say, okay, this is what I'm doing, I'm going ahead with this, right? I mean, there is always this thing where you want to commit to something, but you don't want to, because especially when it comes to games, it's still a niche field, especially in India. It's a growing thing, and you don't want to commit to it fully because you don't know what the future for games is in India. So you'd rather go the web development, app development path, and then maybe see if you want to
Yeah.
do
If you can
this.
like spend some
So
time with this, right? Yeah.
yeah.
That's true. I mean, I kind of felt that because initially, when like a lot of people had asked me this itself, like, it's like not every parent is going to agree to this, or, because if this is a whole concept which is actually there, that, you got to actually like have your parents also know like what you're planning to do, and then
Yeah.
like get your family support basically, that okay, cool, you're good to go with this, right? So not everybody's willing to like bring it up, or try to say that this is what I want to do, or it's changing
Hmm.
definitely, but it's just that it should be a lot more open to a lot more people trying it out, saying that this is, if they're interested in like making video games, and you need to show
Yeah.
that you're passionate about it, right? It's not that just be like, hey, I want to do it because everybody's doing it. You need to show
Everybody is
that you're
doing it.
passionate about it, and then you need to show that okay, it's something that you are invested in, like you said, right? It's interested is one thing, but you need to be fully invested into this to actually get something out of it for yourself too. But just getting back into like the idea of like even like where we were and then how we got to convince our parents was like a lot of, I would say, ground up work that we had, which is something
Oh
that
yeah.
a lot more people are able to freely speak up right now, and they should be able to, because there are like a lot more people who probably they look up to who have been successful. Like LinkedIn is a great way to like reach out to somebody who's already here and who's crossed all those milestones and come here. Like you can speak to somebody, like reach out to anybody and ask them like how they did it, or what their parents had said, and like bringing up similar experiences is like going to help you understand that okay, this is something that you can also do. But again, the whole thing really relies and revolves around the passion that you have towards this field,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing that will like help you stand out, be it like making indie games or making like AAA games. I think like passion towards this field is something that really helps you out.
Yeah, it's kind of super important. Like so many people in the field, they're I mean, it's a well-known fact that the games industry has developers in it who are kind of paid less than your typical, yeah, software devs, right?
Yeah, software
But these
jobs,
people
yes.
are all there purely because they are passionate about making games, and they find joy in making games, right? And that's why they are here. And yeah, like passion's going to be a huge driving factor, but it's not the only thing that's going to help you get into games as such. There are so many other factors like how accessibility and all that, right? But yeah, the first step is just being passionate about it though.
Passionate about it, yes. And that's, I guess that's how both of us started, but in very
Yeah.
different paths. But it
I
eventually
mean,
led
yeah,
to us like that being the driving factor for both
driving
of us
factor to the
getting
point
here.
where
Yeah.
my parents are super supportive of it right now. They're like, yeah, go
Exactly. Yeah.
make that game.
How the
Yeah.
outlook has changed, right? Like from being confused or like skeptical about it, I would say at the start, to like just being fully supportive. Like even with like when games are released, like talking about it, like the environment has changed in such a way that they are now willing to try out and play more games, which I feel is like a win for everybody right now. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure my dad would be like, make one of the games which I used to play as a kid, which is like, on the street he used to play Gilli Danda and all that. And it
yeah,
was like, yeah, like, I don't see games like that, Paul. Can you make that? I was like, yeah, we can make that. But I haven't played that game, so I really don't know how it works. But maybe, I don't know, like, how we see Tamil devs doing a bunch of stuff, but I'm probably guessing that this is going to come, right? Like this is
yeah,
definitely going to happen. But yeah, it's just like yeah, this huge change, dude. Huge, massive change with my parents after a
yeah,
point when like I don't know if I've told you this. It's like there was this one point where I got in my admit into NYU and I was looking at all the expenses and stuff. And then I was just thinking, uh, so there were other schools, but I kind of didn't want to go to the other schools. And NYU was like number one. I was like, yeah, going to the number one schools. Like, of course, which school you go to really doesn't matter that much. It's
It's the
there
work
are a
that you
lot
do
of
there
other.
too.
Yeah, you go there, you still have the drive and passion, you excel. But then again, for me, I was like, I also need to go there because it's like, yes, proving a point kind of stuff.
That's true. Very true. Yeah.
So I was
Gone
like,
to the best.
yeah, I gone to the, yeah, exactly, right. So I look at all the expenses, and then I'm thinking, do I want to do this? This is too pricey. And that was the point where my dad sat me down. It's like, you got all the way through, you are here, like you are 90% there. And I've seen people, like, he is a banker and he has given loans and stuff, and he has seen people pay it off. I've seen people who have taken loans riskier than you, right? Maybe not the same amount,
Hmm.
but still riskier for their,
Yeah.
like their situation. And they have paid it off. They have come out on top, right? So I've seen it happen. It's quite possible. You don't worry about this. You go ahead. So he sat me down, gave me a 45-minute talk where he broke down things and he talked about all the nitty gritties of paying off loans and all that. And he said, it's pretty much possible. You don't worry too much. Just go ahead, study. We'll figure this out. So that was like the biggest thing
Win.
where,
Yeah.
yeah,
Biggest
it
W.
flipped, right? Yeah, the roles flipped where I said, I don't
Yeah.
want to go. And he was like, no, you should be going. And yeah,
That's very true actually. For at that point, when I had gotten the admit as well, I was like, man, this is too pricey. I really need to like do this because it was my parents who were supporting with the education at that time. I was like, okay, I
yeah,
don't know if I'll be able to do this, but them having confidence in me is definitely what like drove me to do much better as well. It's because the pressure and the burden was like them. It was converted more into like them being more confident and supportive, which definitely was much more
yeah.
nicer a situation and an environment around me when I got to study out there. So yeah, a lot of great memories.
Yeah, when I think
How we
about it,
got
yeah,
here.
there are
Yeah.
so many things which I have kind of not sat down to think about. Now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, these are things which I should actually think about and maybe,
Yeah.
journal or whatever. But these are things which I should really sit down, think about, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, but we hope you found this episode useful. This was like our journey on
Yeah.
how we started and got into convincing our parents on how we got into games. We have a lot more exciting coming up in the future. But until then, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next episode.